Welcome everybody to CSpace King Edward. You're also in the RGO Treehouse. As you can tell, we picked an apt name, although it's a little bit hard to see with the BC smoke in the air. I'm so happy that we've got a bit of a full house and that half of you are new. In the dog days of August, it's always a roll of the dice. We were talking this week, it's like, ooh, this could be non-mic'd. I just have to talk to the three people in the front. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at you. I want to talk to you about the story arc of CSpace, of the importance of community to what we do and how we do it. I'm going to talk about the past, where this building has been, to where we're heading into the future, because obviously the story arc is just beginning. But we'll throw a lot of things together, and hopefully you'll come out of this with a little bit of a sense of what it takes to build community in these kinds of artistic, creative spaces. So just to give you a little bit of a background for those of you who don't know, CSpace was formed back in sort of 2012, coming out of over about a decade's worth of research and engagement by two of our partners, Calgary Foundation and Calgary Arts Development Authority. They defined a whole bunch of key challenges that the arts and creative sector and the cultural sector was having in this city. Scarcity of affordable space to work and live, and the impact of Calgary's sort of cyclical real estate market on the instability that creates in the sector. The lack of opportunities for collaboration on a regular basis across disciplines and sectors. So this has always led to a level of kind of isolation and fragmentation. The third thing that they realized was there was an absence of entrepreneurial supports for the arts sector. So that creates an uncertainty and a lack of confidence in it. It kind of undermines the immense potential that our creative sector has in this city. So those three things were kind of what elevated to the top of what the issues of what CSpace was looking at. So these conditions of isolation and fragmentation, instability and uncertainty are really the issues that a lot of cultural and creative sectors across cities in Canada are facing. So we're not novel in that case. Our creative communities really are often separated into silos. Each piece is working hard on its own purpose, but parallel effort together doesn't make a vital community. So this it can trigger creatives at the worst case to look for other cities to invest their talent in. The essential challenge there for us then as CSpace was to try and transform that isolation into vital connectedness in a way. So at CSpace, we began our journey by shifting our lens from the problems of the community to the possibility of community. We're obviously passionate about these guys. This is the entrepreneurial communities of artists and musicians and designers and dancers and makers. And we believe in their power in our neighborhoods and our economy. So we right away declared a possible future in Calgary by imagining what our creatives could do with a network of inspiring spaces, a collaborative and connected community of peers, and the entrepreneurial confidence to bring their ideas to life. Our mission really at CSpace is broken into three things. It's really, long story short, is meant to provide the conditions for diverse communities of creatives to thrive, to be vital, to be sustainable, to be innovative, while generating value for all Calgarians. So we talk about three things. Shared space, so obviously you're in one of our thoughts about that. Affordable, flexible, inspiring. These are all intentionally designed to be responsive to all the evolving needs of the arts and cultural sectors. So whether you're on the commercial, the community, or the nonprofit side, it's changing and shifting so much that we have to future-proof against that. We care about delivering a vibrant community, obviously. Diverse and meaningful opportunities to engage with peers and collaborators is a very important piece for us. It's about getting greater connectivity to each other, but also to the neighborhoods that we locate in. And the last piece is about knowledge sharing. So it's about figuring out a campaign of network of networking, of services, of peer-to-peer mentorship, and all the sort of soft infrastructure that supports creative entrepreneurship. This is our one-stop shop theory of change. So it can be really simplified to 4 C's. We start with our best instinct around the right creative ingredients. We cultivate community to bind those ingredients into potential combinations. We add catalysts for triggering different levels and types of collaboration. And then we back off. We remove ourselves and quietly support the chemistry for change. So for those of you who have ever questioned what CSpace stands for, 4 C's right here. It's not Calgary space, not culture space. It's creativity, community, collaboration, and change. Very simple in theory. This is what it actually looks like. This is our real theory of change. It's complex, it's eclectic. All those 4 things migrate and intersect in 100 different ways on a daily basis. So it is a really complex process of community building. One of the unique sort of things that we try and do to connect the dots of all of those 4 C's together, and it's really the unique purpose of us as a social enterprise, is that we facilitate, as an intermediary, the exchange of value between who we deeply care about in the middle, which is the entrepreneurs, the artists, the nonprofits, and the people on the outside circle, which is trying to take the creative capital that those wonderful Calgary talented people are and what they do and how community binds them, and connect it to investors and partners and stakeholders who provide the financial and political capital to pull these off. So at its most powerful, when we're doing our job best, that value creation comes at the intersection of community building and placemaking. For those of you who don't know that much about us, and there's a lot of people actually who feel this is still the best kept secret on the planet, CSpace, but we also started our work way back in 2011, to be honest. My colleague Dieter and I ran a pilot project in partnership with the Calgary Municipal Land Corporation. And we turned the former Billingsgate Fish Market in East Village, if you're familiar with that. Still had the hint of fishy smell in it when we got it. And we turned it into a 14 studio space for 21 artists. We knew from the beginning that it was a temporary space, so it was sort of an ethereal moment in the development of the art space world that we're in. We knew it was slated for demolition eventually, and we ended up having the space for nearly 2 years. Enough for an amazing community to start forming there organically. And while it was difficult to sit across from a crew of 21 artists late in the day to say, look, the time has now concluded, they are demolishing this site, we're going to have to sort of move on, it certainly reinforced the power of community to transform spaces into places. And it was really this concrete box of a building that was given meaning by a community of artists. So like many art spaces at that time, the fabric of community was unraveled by the ebbs and flows of the real estate market. At the same time as the seafood market studios was sort of concluding, we refocused on a new opportunity. So we knew now from the beginning that the design and planning process of what our flagship project was meant to be had to be an example of the future we were intending to create. So it needed to be a reflection of the connectedness, the openness, and the curiosity we all aspired to support. Our first job really was about understanding. How do we build understanding and build from the significant role of the school that essentially was a community hub for 110 years? How did it play a role in the story of the city? So we started our efforts by learning as much as we could about the meanings that were already layered into the site. So built in 1912, it was one of the last sandstone schools developed in Calgary. We learned that it was a place of innovation too. The King Edward was the very first time that a student play in the Calgary Board of Education was developed and presented. Downstairs, if you go to the Craft Council space, that's the original auditorium. Consider that's where they went to assembly in 1912. They played basketball and obviously had the first play in the city's history by students. It piloted the first junior high model in Alberta. It was a training facility for Calgary's new generation of teachers 2 decades later. We also learned that it was a place of sustainability. So it was constructed through locally sourced sandstone about 7 blocks away, which used to be where Crowchild and 17th interconnected. It was a quarry, locally owned, and it showcased some of the latest building systems and employing local artisans. We also learned in our research that it was a place of adaptability. So it converted into a military base, a cadet training center at the outbreak of World War I and World War II. If you see that house right here, if Rockwood just hadn't built 3 stories, if it was 2, you could see it, but just pop out to the other side, those houses still exist. So huge, huge history. King Edward was also a place of talent development. We've come to learn that it was a breeding ground for future energy barons, world-class artists, and political leaders. William Aberhart, that you see in the top left, pictured in the top row, was the first principal. He was also the 7th Premier of Alberta. So in the early days, we sort of captured that history and that community embeddedness, and then we opened up the building a little bit to explore more ways that people connect with the building. So we hosted Jane's Walks, even while we were still sort of under development and in construction. So moving out of that stage, you want to reflect on the possibility of what the current state is. And there were a lot of nuances to this building when we picked it up, but we wanted to bring in the perspectives of artists. We wanted to pull our community in at the very start and start having them see this opportunity, this possibility through their eyes. So we brought in about 125 photographers from post-secondary camera clubs, heritage camera enthusiasts, and artists that we knew. This is an old school medium format camera. And we just asked them to shoot. And they spent 2 days just shooting and seeing spaces and looking at light and trying to understand sort of the quietness of a once built, once busy classroom. How did that inspire us for reusing creative space? How did they capture the sort of vacancy of once bustling halls, and what did that do in terms of our thinking about creating common areas in the buildings and to make them vital again? One photographer captured the view down a mortar joint, so a very close-up scaled shot of a 100-year-old sandstone block, and it provokes an understanding of the materiality of the building and the impacts of time on a building. So obviously we wanted to start to see things differently and engage the perspectives of artists at a very early date. That idea of engaging new perspectives ran throughout the development process. As a new kid on the block, you might recognize this, yes, puppets, yes, from those guys. We sidled up to a lot of people. I mean, you have to realize, I'm an Edmonton-born dude, spent time in Calgary in the 90s, went to Toronto for 16 years, came back and had this big brash idea of scale and this big bold idea. Well, you don't get anywhere unless you build community from the very beginning. So we asked a lot of people to be our friend. And we asked a broad range of creative people to collaborate with us on a new vision for what an arts incubator would look like. And they brought their core values and they brought their own ideas to the circle. For us, placemaking really begins with listening. Through our planning process, we listened early and we listened often. Local residents, community association joined our board. Artists, city urban designers, parks planners, they were all brought into our advisory committees. Hundreds of people attended our public open houses to share insights. Dozens of artists and nonprofit organizations participated in the sort of concept development. And I'm going to say the investment in open dialogue and collaborative design was purposeful. So I deeply believe that the accountability for transforming communities grows up in the act of co-creation, which is a very important piece for us. So all of that 2 years worth of work culminated in 3 core ideas about what we were trying to pull off. You have to remember that this idea was sort of 10 years in the making, long before I came. But we were able to sort of focus a lot of efforts and partnerships. And there were lots of generous contributions of co-creators. The concept of an innovative creative hub wrapped around these ideas really became a driving force to a vision that was shared among a lot of different people. and it was really a bold idea of how creativity could intersect with everyday life. So great. You kind of know the history. You've worked with a lot of people to sort of form the vision and start talking about what a new possibility is. Well, how do you shift the conversation of a vacant and derelict site? A school that had been empty for 12 years by the time we had bought it. It was kind of taken over by a 6-person dog walker community that felt this was their dedicated space. 3 acres of places to poop. So the very first thing is we tried to make signals about transforming and changing the conversation and signaling a new possibility. So in 2012, we had this 80,000 square foot derelict building that we had to change that conversation. So we took those photographs, picked the best ones that we thought and the community thought were great, and we blew them up to, 8-foot large banners, and we wrapped the portion of the school that was being demolished, just to signal to this community that there's a new heartbeat. We also opened up our doors in 2012 and worked with one of Calgary's most prolific sort of community builders, Mark Hopkins, to truly explore what the possibility of the building could be. So we had 80 organizations come and take over every last square inch of this building. Every classroom had a different use in it, a community showcase, an art piece, and so on. We worked with wonderful organizations such as Prospect Studio C, which is down on level 2, to create an outdoor public art project. The front lawn became a place for the collision of different cultures, youth, music. Our industrial arts room, the old industrial arts room, became a screening room for people to interact with media in different ways. Our hallways and teachers' lounges became places for artistic discussions and practice and exploration. Our school grounds became a testing bed for Springboard Performance's container project in partnership with Decidedly Jazz. This container shipping thing came directly from Vancouver's waterfront because it was there for the Olympics. It now sits in Sunnyside, and I think it's got a new home coming down the pipe. Part of what we also wanted to do with all these people coming back to the site after it being sort of a dead space for so long was connect with alumni and teachers of the King Edward School. So we tried to capture those stories. There was even someone who brought a 1925 yearbook of their mothers and talked to us with a teary conversation. So we captured those as best we could. And of course, we had a balloon room. I still have a memory of Joe Cece, our Minister of Finance, and another counselor at the time, kicking through this room like giddy little girls, bouncing the balloons up and down. It was a pretty interesting moment. Anyway, over about 2,500 people came through the school that weekend, and we learned a lot from how we can embrace the idea of a commons and a gathering place. An equally important moment in our story arc, really following that sort of beautiful celebration of community, was actually born out of crisis. So very few people know this. We kept it very quiet at the time, but in 2013 in the flood, we had an 80,000 square foot building that wasn't very special, looked like a bag of crap, had a lot of things wrong with it. But we knew that there was a community in need. There were tons of nonprofits, there were a lot of artists, and there were collectors who had massive flood implications. So we opened the doors very quietly. The city worked with us, turned a blind eye to code, and we had millions and millions of dollars worth of art here, covered in 8 inches or 8 centimeters of silt. We had triage units from the Glenbow Museum coming and restoring art. What you see here is work from Ron Moppet, Dale Kirschenbaum, Stride Gallery. We even had High River Museum come and unpack a lot of their collection to have people work on it. This piece right here in the front, this was a really powerful and emotional moment for us. Ron Moppet is a well-known contemporary artist across Canada. This is his entire sort of studio's worth of collection, and we had moments where he would try and restore it. There were massive amounts of dehumidifiers going. He had moments of breakdown where he was going to cut up all of his work. It was just sort of one of those low moments. But honestly, we played a very sort of neutral but important role in helping that community sort of return. And I'm happy to say that that piece now sits in the National Gallery in Ottawa. So those are just the sort of things what openness does in building community. We had one crazy time in 2013 where we wanted to showcase what the intersection of 100 different things would look like in this building. So in one weekend, we had Phantom Wing, which was 15 artist teams who took salvage material from the building and created art pieces out of it throughout the whole site. There was live music, there was live art, performance art. On one side of the building in the old gymnasium, we had 600 people come into a PKN night, a Pacha-Kacha night, talk about ideas. We had installation art where this is the mayor and his really oddly maniacal grin that he has behind the wings of death. Like, there's something to that. And then on another night, we had YYC Fashion Week of a bunch of very emaciated, skinny women walking through. So but that was a moment where it's like, that is what differentiates us. We want diversity, we want openness, we want cross-pollination. And that's kind of fundamentally what we tried to do. We continued on before construction to try and just use the space for community building as much as possible. And so we invited community builders in to use the space. This is Market Collective in December 2013. We had over 150 artists and artisans, 6,000 people per weekend. It tested the ability of my neighbors to handle parking and traffic issues. And we've continued that for a very, very long time. So we wanted to engage as many artists as we possibly could in lots of different ways throughout all aspects and all parts of our work. This is the groundbreaking where we commissioned 18 helmets to be designed by local illustrators and graffiti artists. So we get through that. We've gone through construction. How do we set the stage for community building in a significant way? We reimagined the 150-year-old vacant and derelict school, but if you know sandstone schools, you realize that they're architecturally impenetrable buildings. Like, you go up to them, they're solid, they're heavy, they're institutional. So every chance we had to unpack, to cut into, to bring light in or creativity out was used. And transparency is a significant kind of value for community building. How do you create a neutral playground for lots of people to come together? So once again, how do you use transparency, porosity? We want to unpack the creative process in this building. We want this to be a place not where you come to see a final show, a final exhibition, the final product. We want you to come on a day-to-day basis and see an artist work through their creative process, see a dance company working through their project. And so the architecture and the design and the intent is to do that. We build healthy and inspiring spaces, great light, great air quality. Those are all design thinking behind this. Our hallways are really considered as neighborhood streets. So how do we turn those 16-foot wide hallways where girls and boys collided in this, crazy chemistry to support a newer version of collaboration? How do you bring in cafe uses? This is a crazy use of our theater by a medical imaging company who thought it was cool to have their president talk to their senior staff in couches. I would be dead asleep by 10:30. I would be like, oh, that's really good. We've built places like this to be a common ground for different people to meet. Our co-working space is infused with art and a possibility. We've even worked with our partners on each side. That development of housing here and 95 units of seniors residence housing was part of the financial partnership, but it was also recognizing that we wanted to create an urban precinct around an arts-led vision. And these guys have been great. On this side, they're incorporating a 5-stanza poem that Chris Demeanor, the original poet laureate, created for us into their concrete. Those guys over there are taking salvaged sandstone that we gave them, and they're making a massive hearth out of it to embed the legacy of this building into their communities as well. So, early stage of collaboration, what else creates community that we've been able to do? Collaboration is critical to having a community come in here and bring their own passion, their own sort of nurturing of space. Our public artists, we have about $250,000 worth of public art that's getting done on site. If you have a chance when you leave today, don't go down the elevator, don't go down these steps, but go to the far end and head down that stairwell. There's a 4-story piece of work. And we tried to work with teams of young Calgary talent who used community engagement as a major part of what they do. So these guys brought hundreds of kids together, came up with made-up words, took those made-up words and brought them to another set of kids who drew pictures from those words, and then they took those pictures as the basis of their work for the Imaginarium. The other team downstairs, if you go down the steps out to the park, there is a installation that's taking way too long, but is in there right now of 105 hourglasses. They interviewed hundreds of people about the expression of time. So there is 105 different shapes and times that are captured in that, recognizing the 105 years that this building was created to where we opened it up as a new art space. And there are times like, how long does it take to fall in love? How long does it take to stretch canvas on a piece of work? And they've captured those moments through a lot of community engagement. Even some of our local artist tenants have imprinted themselves on the building. This is King Edward's face with a new wrap of artistic integrity wrapped around him. We've partnered with Honen's Piano Festival. If you go out the back doors to the parking lot, we worked with them. This was a piano that was left by the school board. You have to remember, when we bought this building, it was like you know those apocalyptic movies where the nuclear devastation comes through and everything's just sort of frozen. 2 pianos were left. There were school lockers full of stuff. I don't think the kids realized at the time that it was closed, that it was closing for the next year. It was that kind of weirdness. So we worked with Honen's to restore one of the pianos. They worked with a graphic designer to wrap it, and this launched their program, I think last year. Had 5 pianos made, and that sits down there, of which you can go play. So those are all things that we kind of generated or we triggered in a certain way. We also just sort of asked the question about, well, what does community mean to you? And then, how do those communities form? So we've become a unique arts-infused gathering place for the creative sector. This is Ad Rodeo, who came and did a massive portfolio review. That's part of their community. It's also coming up this fall again. We've been a place where the fashion and design community have come together to talk about what is driving business and entrepreneurship in the creative sector. They're coming back in October. We've been a place for arts entrepreneurship training from an incubator out of Australia who brought in people locally about how to think about entrepreneurship. There's you guys. Very, very big part of your community is forming and how we can facilitate that. We become a gathering place for community. We become a location for a farmer's market. You guys have to come on a Saturday. It is the moment where I like to walk around, not because I'm feeling I need to work on a Saturday, but because it's the biggest expression of community that we have in an intensive, amazing moment. Even our tenants are driving their own sense of community. So we have a lot of anchor tenants in this building that are hubs themselves. So Alexander Writer Center has 600 members who come and use this as a writing location. We have Call, who is this amazing dynamo of an organization that is self-programmed with culture, arts, travel, food, you name it. One of the best expressions of whether we're being successful or not in community building is when you walk in our front door and look at that set of old lockers, and to see how much stuff is going on in here or how the rest of Calgary is connecting to us. I love to take shots of this all the time. So to wrap up, I just leave you with a last thought from one of our partners that he shared with us at our groundbreaking in 2015. So we have as our purpose to build a great city. And so with CSpace's approach to building community, I hope we play a small part in shaping and amplifying that possibility for Calgary's future generations. Thank you.